computer. Very good. Morena, everybody, this is session 2 of the Snapshot audit. This is the karakia that we shared with the group. I'm taking you past the breakout group for us to begin today. In the breakout group, we had some introductions and talked about what your most recent clinical audit data experience was about. So just for people who may not be aware of the designated services that we are auditing the clinical service delivery in, it's 6 services and 7 audits. And some for Auckland, because of Starship, they actually have 7 different services. But these are the services that are involved in the Snapshot clinical audit, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So this is Snapshot Session 2, 1 of 5. And the first one, we had a brief introduction, and just so you know, on our VIP evaluation website, there is a brief video from Session 1, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint, and I'll do the same for each of the sessions. So if anybody misses a session or wants to revisit any of the content, they can look at the slides. So after today, I'll be posting the Session 2 slides and hopefully a video as well. So in today's session, it's all about preparing for the audit, thinking about who should be involved, the eligibility and sampling we'll talk about, and the number of people to be included in each of the audit, and just a little bit about a random sample as well. So in preparing for the voyage, I think it's important for us, this whakatoki I think is quite useful here, te toia te homatia. So it talks about us achieving something with a plan, a workforce, and a way of doing things. So it's quite important before we begin the audit that we really think about preparing to make sure that we have the planning that's necessary ahead of time before the waka is brought to shore. So in thinking about planning, I will approach this as a mini PDSA. So thinking about plan, do, study, act. So in this little chart here, we have planning, and planning actually can take place between from now through June. And the eligibility period for the clinical audits is April, May, and June. So the doing of the audit actually can't take place until July. So between now and July, it's all about just making sure that everything's in order for you to be able to do the clinical snapshot audits with the support and the resources and the knowledge that you need to be able to do a useful audit. And after the doing of the collection of the data, and the remainder of the year will be the study and the act. So interpreting the data and deciding which actions to take based on that. So within the model for improvement in planning, it is important to know where you're starting from. So I encourage each of you to have a look at your historical data from Snapshot. So we have data from snapshots up until from about, I think, 2016 to 2019. There were 3 services that were to be audited in 2020. And then you may also have ad hoc audits that you've done outside of the snapshot audits. So it's important to just take a moment and have a look at what your data has been over time for your particular district across the different services that you have. And for new coordinators, this will be maybe an exercise in trying to locate files. So call us if you need help. Once you're able to log into the snapshot system, you'll be able to have access to the snapshot data, but you may have other clinical audits that have been reported that weren't within the snapshot session. Once, along with the plan for PDSA, as well as knowing where you're starting from, what was your routine inquiry, what was your assessment rate for child protection checklists, and concern and disclosure rates and referrals, also want to know what have there been any improvement actions, particularly since the last audit. Certainly COVID would have had quite a large impact on all of you. But it is important to think, have there been certain services where you've done some improvement actions, some change actions to increase the service delivery in those clinical areas? So it's important to be aware of where you're going to be looking for change. So what is your prediction? What change do you expect for 2024 snapshot data? And then the final part of the plan is identifying what tasks are needed. So this is our list of some of the tasks that we think are useful to prepare for the snapshot audit. First is to create a timeline. Kathy, just checking, what screen are you seeing? Can you tell me? Are you seeing the slideshow?
Yep, seeing the slideshow and I've got the tasks.
What was that?
Yep, I'm seeing the slideshow and I've got the tasks slider.
Okay, thanks. So the first task is to think about the timeline. So when will your team be ready? Next is to identify the audit team members, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. The next is to access sufficient resources and support, to identify who will complete each audit, and it will be both who will review the record data and who will enter the data. And ideally, that's the same person. So some districts I know will review the charts and enter the data in something else and then import it into Snapshot. But the Snapshot audit website was made to be able to have the record in front of you and enter the data directly into Snapshot. So that'll be something that your team will need to decide. Then you'll need to ensure that the team members are clear on the process that they follow. And then finally, in the task, to identify who will participate in the analysis, the dissemination, and the development of the improvement plan. So putting together your team for the snapshot audit and indeed for enacting the model for improvement is quite important. We talk about the VIP manager, the governance group, and as we did site visits across the country, we know that many of the governance groups have disbanded or not been active. Certainly in 2022, that was the case. So hopefully you will be beginning to re-energize your governance groups and your districts. So it's not just about the coordinators. So the snapshot audit is about the system. It is about what the VIP team and the district leadership supports for best clinical practice to occur. So it is about a team approach. In conducting the audits, you may involve clinical champions. You may involve quality and risk department. You may involve Maudie Health, certainly in the interpretation and the action plans. You'll involve perhaps your clinical records department or what that might be called, and the IT department or your district intelligence division or your business unit or the service in your district that's responsible for keeping the health records, because this will be key to be able to identify your eligible sample and to create your random sample for doing the clinical snapshot audit. So that relationship will be quite keen. And that is something that you can start now on addressing, is working out who it is that you need to see within your district to be able to support the sampling. And it could be that your quality and risk may be a go-between that can help you identify who you need to talk with. Finally, it is about making sure, is there administrative support that you have, and how that can be used to increase the efficiency of the clinical snapshot audit process. Any others that may be available that can assist you. Does anybody have any questions before we go on? Let me see if there's any. You can either speak up or put it in the chat box, either one. And Kathy, if you can just, like an earlier in our first session, if you could just check the chat section or for raised hands, that would be great. So I'll go ahead on to the next slide.
Yeah, nothing in the chat.
Okay.
But Jane, I had just one question, which I'm
Yes.
kind of asking on behalf of everybody. Can you have too many people allowed to log on to the snapshot database from your district?
Can you have too many? I would suggest that each district can answer that question themselves.
Okay. So for us,
Each one would have a login. The problem, I think, with too many people able to log in is that you may lose some of there may be some errors introduced. So it may be better to have a login. The login is your district email address and then a password. So you can decide in your service that you would have a common password that if you want others to have access to, that they would use your email address and that password that you set up specifically for Snapshot. But in the past, every coordinator will be able to log in and create a unique password. There is a way. Our admin person, Eric Wee, is the person, and he's listed in the snapshot information instructions, and he can set up the ability to log in if there are people that you want to be able to enter data or to see the data, and you'd like them to have their own login, such as your VIP manager, or perhaps if an administrator is going to be entering the data. So there are some options there, but it's something to think about how you want people to be able to access it. I'm not sure. I would guess that there may be a problem if more than one person is accessing the site at the same time, Kathy. So I think I would probably avoid people entering data at the same time. I can check with our IT person to see if that causes problems, but I would think that it might. So that's just one concern that may come up.
Okay, there is a question now in the chat from Angela. It's a comment. She said, sorry, I'm laughing as we can't get any sort of help at all. There's two of us, that's it, and we both work part-time. Absolutely, Angela, I get that 100%. I am only just starting to realize, after having done this work for many years, that we actually have permission to include all these other people. It doesn't have to be just us. You may have a clinical champion in the area, like, for example, in child health, you may have a champion. And it's not that they have to enter the information into the database, but if you print off the NHIs that are your random ones for child health, maybe the clinical champion could do the first 10 of those and audit them, and then put the information, send the information back to you, and then you input it into the database. Did you want to say anything else, Jane?
No, I think the VIP manager I think what we could do from an evaluator point of view is to re-email the VIP managers. And it could be that we could involve Kathy Phillips, who is the Te Whātua manager, to send out an email to managers for them to pay attention to properly resourcing the collection of the snapshot data. So that might be something that we can do to help you, Angela, and others in the same position, I'm sure. So thanks for that. Good question. So moving forward, just going to spend a little time talking about who is eligible and the total number eligible. So just to identify that the number of eligible people, it's either how many visits by women or children were seen in the service during the 3-month period who could receive a family violence estimate. So this is called the sampling frame. So from April 1st through 30th of June, all of the visits to each of the 7 sites or 7 audits, that is the sampling frame. All of the women or children seen in that service during that time period. And then from that sampling frame is pulled the random sample for the clinical audit to take place. And there is a bit of a difference between whether it's community mental health or alcohol and drugs. So I'll talk about that next. So we have the target population, and then which is all women who enter the service across the whole year. The sampling frame is the number of people in the service who are eligible during that 3-month period. And then the simple random sample is a random sample, which means that everybody in that 3-month period who's eligible has equal probability of being selected. So that's instead of taking a convenience sample. So instead of saying, I'm just going to audit every consecutive woman who comes in for a week, the simple random sample, everyone in that 3-month period should have equal probability of being selected. And the reason for doing a random sample is that we can then be able to come up with national estimates that have a bit of precision. So everybody is measuring the same way. The process of collecting the random sample is the same nationally. And this allows us to create a national report that has estimates that have a certain level of precision. So it goes from the population to the sampling frame to your actual snapshot clinical random sample. So the snapshot information document is on our VIP evaluation website, and pretty much everything that we're covering in these sessions is included in that document. And in the snapshot information sheet is within the resources section of the snapshot audit, as well as the presentations that are here. So that document is your go-to document. So going back to talking about eligibility, when you're thinking of a service, so within VIP, there is a designated service, and in that service, you've worked hard in training people. There's policies and procedures that give the expectation that people who come into that service will receive a VIP assessment. Cases will be identified. They will receive an intervention and an appropriate referral. So when you think of a service and the flow through that service and who is eligible, you need to talk through with your service. Are there any people that will be in the database and that from an IT perspective who should not be included in that eligible sample. An example might be someone who comes through ED who's in labor and they end up showing up in ED. They may get registered in ED, but they go straight to a birthing room or labor and delivery. Or so the people in the ED have no responsibility for that person as they're transported up. Another example might be a child health unit award that has a procedure room. And some children come in, they're brought in by a consultant, they go to the procedure room, they do a procedure and leave. So they actually aren't under the care of that service. But those cases may actually be included from a database point of view in the files. So they may be listed as an admission, for example, in the child ward. So it is important to think through and talk to your service people and your IT people who's included. If we pull everybody who was admitted to that ward during that 3-month period, will we systematically have any errors? And is there a way that we can exclude them from the eligible sample? So, any questions about that? That's kind of a mouthful. Does that make sense to people?
I think, Jane, it might be a good point to talk about the data collection, well, not the data collection, but the random sample document that we're just looking at confirming now. In my little whakawhanaungatanga group, I was explaining how the document about the VIP Snapshot is fantastic, but it's very comprehensive. And so there's some information in there for your department that's going to pull your NHIs. There's also some information in there for you as a VIP coordinator. So the whole idea is that we've pulled the information out that just your department that would be pulling your NHIs needs. Yep. And this information that you're talking about here is one of those things, so that it's a little bit more simple for them to see very clearly what it is that you need from them.
Great. Thanks for that, Kathy. Yep. So in thinking of eligibility, another issue is the unit of analysis. So in most of the services, it is about a visit. So that does mean if people get admitted twice during a 3-month period, that the expectation would be that on both of those occasions, that they would actually be assessed for family violence. So the expectation is that there would be another routine inquiry. Or if someone is readmitted to the emergency department, that they again would have a routine inquiry or a child protection checklist if they're readmitted more than once during that audit 3-month period. The unit of analysis, however, in terms of eligibility for community mental health and alcohol and drug is a little bit different, because we know that when people enter those services, their full assessment may take place over more than one so-called visit. So it may be that their intake assessment occurs over the first 2 or 3 visits. So in community mental health and A&D, recognizing that assessment may take place over a couple visits, the unit of analysis for community mental health and alcohol and drugs during that 3-month period is the notion of a new client. And what gets entered and is audited for service delivery with regard to VIP assessment and intervention and referral is the index visit and up to 2 subsequent follow-up visits within the following 2 months that should be reviewed for IPV routine inquiry. So recognizing the context of their service delivery they can do that. We recognize they may do that full assessment over several visits. So the eligibility then is a new client as opposed to every single visit that occurs during those 3 months.
Jane, there's a question or a comment here from Marianne Pike. In the children's ward, often the older children's parent does not stay as a border parent. We just ask the border parent in the ward. Parent that is admitted with the child in the ward. I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Marianne. Do you want to unmute?
What I mean is, so it already influences, you know, so our selection. So because we draw the files of, so usually IT draw the files where of children admitted in the ward. So only then we open up the files, and then some of the children's parents has not, a female parent did not stay in the ward. So we then ask, you know, we sometimes then have to ask for more files. And it then tends to be the child that's younger that has a border parent staying. At the end of the day, it's possibly those children that are more at risk, would you say? But it influenced possibly our selection, because without knowing, it is usually the female caregiver that stays in the ward. It could, so we don't ask the fathers, of course. So it will be the female caregiver, and it's usually the younger children where they stay overnight.
Yeah, well, we would expect that if a child is admitted, that, you know, hopefully their female caregiver, they don't need to board with the child, but they might be visiting the child during their admission. So that would be the opportunity to screen. I think one thing that recognizes some of the complexity of that is in the snapshot audit, we do include the age of the child. So that allows you to say, ooh, are we missing assessments for maybe older children? So to me, that would be something that could be investigated, and you could have a think about that. So the guidelines are that if there is a child admitted to the ward, the expectation would be that a female caregiver would be assessed for intimate partner violence. So I think it is, you know, that is a unique situation where the female caregiver certainly isn't boarding necessarily with the older children. But I think the expectation is that there would be an opportunity, hopefully, to talk about family violence with the female caregiver. So it is interesting. You raise an interesting point, but I think it's good to consider what the expectation is, and then what the data is and how you interpret that, and what things might be put in place for improvement to happen.
Yeah, I just think, Jane, that the way we set it up, the question, the coding is in the border parents' notes at the back of the child's file, not in the children's notes.
So usually the child's notes should have the family violence screen documentation that, you know, whether the so-called stamp, the routine inquiry stamp should be in the child's note. And then if there is a disclosure, then that the follow-up documentation would go, you're correct, that would go in the female caregiver's record.
Yeah. That's just something I'll have a look if we've got it in the child's file. But so we've always looked at the border parents file, but like you say, we set up systems and it can skew our things. But I mean, sometimes they are older children with their parents, children with disabilities, children that will need care in the evening. So there would be older children as well with carers staying.
Yeah.
Okay,
great. Good question. These are all the issues that come up in doing the clinical audits. and where the documentation is. So the next thing about eligibility to talk about is just the sample size, I think. And, when we started doing snapshot audits, it was a real difficult question to say how many charts is enough. And we really had to balance the burden. And we recognized that for most services and most districts, this is a manual process of record review. And to actually conduct 7 audits for many of you, some of you don't have all of the services, but that is that is a burden to conduct those audits. So I think we needed to balance the burden of clinical audits along with how much precision do we need. So nationally, we do want a so-called snapshot of the national service delivery. And we talked about why in the first session in terms of accountability as well as for learning to feed into our system so we can have improvements. So the decision was made at that point that the sample size would be 25. I think it's important to recognize that in some smaller districts, particularly maybe in alcohol and drug, you may have fewer than 25 new female clients in that three-month period. So most of the clients that may be seen in some of the community services may be frequent visits by the same clients. So in some cases, you may finish your audit when you have a sample frame that's less than 25. And in that case, you don't do a random sample, you would do all. So let's say you had, in your district, you had 20 new clients in alcohol and drugs over the 3-month period in terms of women 16 years and over. So you would include all of them and you would provide that data for all. And on the snapshot system, after you had 20, you would click done. So that can happen in the smaller districts. So we recognize that we want to have a random sample of 25, but on some occasions, there may be some records that you're unable to locate. And people who have experience in doing the snapshot audits will know that in some cases they're unable to locate records. So it's good to know in your setting, if records are digitalized, for example, you should be able to get, if you draw a random sample of 25, you should be able to get all 25. But from experience, if you know you're unlikely to be able to access all 25 records, you may ask your IT system to provide you a list of randomly selected records within the eligible sample that's greater than 25. So you may say, for example, to your IT people, I need the number of eligible people during this 3-month period. And then if you could give me a list of NHIs for a random sample of 30, and then you would start at the top of the list and you would continue until you had 25 records. And you can adjust that based on your experience. If you're auditing and you're finding that the records you're pulling aren't eligible, that means that there's some problem that's happening with identifying eligibility. So it would be good if you talked with your service and your IT people to understand what the problem is with eligibility, and maybe give me a ring and we can talk through what is this group of people who are ineligible, and how can you systematically pull them out of the eligible sample if that is the case. So it does take some work working with your service and IT to find out, have you got that right? Another point to make is if you're in a service that has resource you can always elect to do a random sample of more than 25 records. So let's say you're a district that has the capability and the capacity to do more than 25. So you could do, for example, a sample of 50 records, and you might do that in all of your services, or you may elect to do more than 25 and maybe one service. So if you've been really focusing on one particular department, and maybe ensuring that all the staff are trained, maybe you've been doing ward visits every week, you've gone to staff meetings, you've done some change actions, and you want a bit more precision in that particular ward, you can always elect to have a larger random sample. But it's important that that decision needs to be made ahead of time. So you need to talk with your IT person and say, for that particular ward, I would like my goal is to do a random sample of 50, for example, and you may ask for a list of 60, and you may collect the data on the first 50 people in that list. So that is something that you can choose to do, and you can enter it in the snapshot audit, and you can just say that the random sample that you've done is 50. And then when you're done with that, you could hit done, or you could do 30 or 35. It's just that the larger sample you have, the more precision you have in your data. So that's just something for you and your chief, to consider. So again, the last point is just about that accuracy in terms of who's eligible and who's not. I do have Kathy Lowe has started, and we've been working together to make improvements on IT or business analyst information sheet. So I should be able to post that on the VIP website by the end of the week. And I'll probably send out an email to those to the coordinators to let you know that that's available. And in the Dropbox, Miranda's has included a how to select an audit sample that's very detailed. So you or your IT, for those who want more information about random sampling, feel free to have a look at that. I think when we're talking about clinical audits of VIP service delivery, the snapshot audit was developed to really just collect minimum data. So the only things that, and we'll talk about this at the next session about what variables are actually collected, but it essentially has minimum data. So it is just about whether there was an assessment, whether there was a disclosure or a concern, and whether there was a referral or a consultation and what kind. So there are very few data elements in the clinical snapshot audit. And again, that was to reduce burden. So there is the snapshot system can be used for the official audit, which is what we're talking about now. It's the standardized audit of a random sample of 25 people from each service between that presented for care between April and June. But you also can use the snapshot audit for an ad hoc audit. And within the snapshot system, you'll see that there is an entry where you say whether it's the official snapshot audit or an ad hoc audit. So you can feel free to use the snapshot system to do an ad hoc audit if you'd like, and it will graph and chart for you your data over time. If you want to do a clinical audit for deeper system learning, Miranda has developed documentation audit tools that are more detailed and where there's deeper learning about the system. And those are in Dropbox. And those of you who don't have Dropbox can email Miranda or Kayleen and request those be emailed to you. So if you are interested over time in a deeper system learning through clinical audits, you can feel free. Those documents are available to you. This is what it looks like when you go to the VIP Snapshot audit website. And we'll be talking about logging in and whatnot in later sessions, but the snapshot information sheet on our VIP evaluation website does give some information about how to log in. So you can feel free to have a squiz, have a look at it, and see how you go with logging in. And that way, in our next session, when we do talk about logging in, we can answer your questions. And you can also, from the snapshot information form, you can email us if you're having trouble ahead of time to get you through so you're able to log in successfully. So the next session is about what is going to be measured in terms of intimate partner violence and child abuse and neglect. We'll also talk about ethnicity and the difference between an active and passive referral. So that's going to be covered in the next session. So essentially, that's all we wanted to cover today, was really just to talk about what eligibility means and what a random sample is, and who you need to put in place to begin your planning to be able to do the clinical audits. I think I will now just show you, if I can. On your screen now, do you see a Word document, Kathy?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, good. So this is the information that you could potentially share with your IT, intelligence, or business units who are going to be responsible for identifying the eligibility, the number of eligible visits or new clients, and then your list of random sample. So this talks about the role for district data managers, what data you'll need, and some frequently asked questions. And then it talks about the eligibility criteria for each of the different services. So we'll make that available as well. So going back again, this is the website that will have the information, and I'll just go to that now and open up. This is the website, and here under evaluation presentations, there is the under resources, under snapshot, we have the evaluation information snapshot file, the video from the first session, and here is here's the video, and that's the PDF of the slides. And this is the update that was sent to you in March about the VIP evaluation activity for 2024. So all of that is on the website. Other information about the Delphi and PDSAs and a little bit about Premier Healthcare is available as well. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing now and give you the opportunity to ask any questions.
Nothing in the chat at the moment, Jane. So
Yeah.
feel free to unmute yourselves if there's anything you want to ask.
Yep. And was this helpful or not helpful or? Clear as mud? Mm. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and me karakia whakamutanga tātou, kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, homie, huie, taikie. And do feel free to get in touch. And let us know if we can talk through anything that we went over today. And we're happy to explain things to the VIP managers or your IT people directly as well. So feel free to use us as a resource along with the documentation that we're providing everybody. So go well.
Just a comment that, you know, if you've got issues that you think, oh, well, that doesn't work for our particular district, we want to hear that as well, because we've tried to make this as national as possible, but we realise that each locality has specific issues just for them. So feel free to contact.
Very good. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today, and have a good week.